We're going to make some Mexican chicken soup and some chicken taquitos and taquitos and some blueberry turnovers. So let's start by getting our onions caramelizing up, because what we're going to do for this is we're going to cook up our vegetables, throw in our shredded chicken, season it up, and then I'll pull some of that out to fill up my taquitos on there. So it's kind of a way to use just one pot to make this whole deliciousness. And like I said, I am kind of cook out of my refrigerator and freezer, trying to get everything cleared out for the new year so I can start fresh on the new year. So I'm going to get creative with some of our ingredients that I have. I'm going to see how long I can stretch it. Okay, let's flip these eyes over. I'm going to dice these up nice and small, get them caramelizing. Here. And we're doing a Mexican themed soup is because the other day I opened up a can, which I thought was just diced tomatoes, and they were the like spicy diced tomatoes. So I was like, oh, they didn't go with what I was making the other day. So I had it. I'm like, I got to use this up before it goes bad. So the soup was born. Okay, so we've got our onions diced up. I'm going to get a little drizzle of olive oil in here. I'm going to turn this on and start heating up. And we'll let these start to saute, get a good caramelization on it. And then we'll also be throwing in celery, carrots, some peppers, and that's kind of like the base of our soup, like the veggie base. We'll also have canned diced tomatoes and shredded chicken. But let's get that going. Let's give these guys a little toss. Coat them up. And then we're going to work on our base for our popovers. So, like I said, cooking through all of our kind of food here. And I had 3 partial containers of blueberries that are ready to be cooked up and used. So we're going to put our blueberries in here. Turnovers, I don't know why I said popovers. Turnovers, we're having turnovers. Although popovers might make an appearance this week because I love popovers. And I have lots of eggs because I just opened up a 5 dozen pack of eggs. So we've got lots of eggs in our house. So we're going to start with, I'm going to say this is probably close to a pound of blueberries, maybe a little shy of it because it was kind of, parsed, together for it. And we're going to turn our back burner on, let it start to heat. And then I'm going to grate some lemon zest in here. We'll squeeze a little bit of lemon juice, add a little vanilla and some sugar, and we'll let it kind of cook up to make our base for it. So let's get our lemon zesting. And this will add a nice little tanginess and a little extra pop of flavor to the blueberries. And the nice thing is with a pop or a turnover, now I've got my mind on it, you don't need a whole lot of fruit to fill up the inside of it, because if you put too much, then they get runny. So having little bits of stuff is great. Okay. And we don't need a whole lemon. Just a good squeeze of half a lemon should be enough to add that nice little sour kick to it. Okay. And let me wash my hands because I've been lemonified. And then we're going to add a small pat of butter in here. So when we add our cornstarch as our little thickener in a little bit, the butter always takes away that kind of chalky flavor. So just about a tablespoon. And then we're going to add a splash of vanilla. And some sugar. And then we'll let those start to kind of cook. The natural juices in the blueberries, once it gets warm, will start to pop out. And that will give us a really great base for our turnovers. And we're going to do about, let's say 3/4 of a cup of sugar, maybe a little bit less. We don't need a whole lot. It will do a little less. because blueberries are pretty sweet, and even though it's a good amount of blueberries, they do kind of shrink down, so you don't want it too sweet. Give these a nice little turn, coat them up, and then we'll let them kind of start to cook. There we go. On there. So while that's cooking and that base is getting going, let's come over here and check on our onions. I'm going to turn it down to a 5 now. Now that they've got a good starting to caramelize on them. We'll give this a good little stir.
How were the meatballs and naan?
Oh, excellent. They were delicious. I think my husband said they were the best. It was the best naan and lamb dish that I had made this year. And they were really, really flavorful. I used this Greek Freak, which has a little kick in it, and it was just really, really lovely. Added like a little spiciness to it, which was nice. And then they were just very tender. And the naan, oh, I just love homemade naan. It's just so delicious. Okay, we're going to get some carrots peeled and diced up to go into our soup. And then I have a couple sweet peppers and some celery. And those are going to be our like aromatic vegetables that are going to go in here. Yeah, these are very skinny carrots today. And slide this guy. And just little pops of them just to help flavor up that broth, add a little pop of color to it. But again, carrots, I don't want them to be a main component in there. They're just going to be more of like a little subtle, tasty bits. So I'm going to kind of cut down, not all the way because their tips are pretty small, but kind of quarter it. So we'll again have nice little diced bits. And then we'll throw these in there to saute up. And we'll get our celery in there and our peppers, and then we'll get some shredded chicken. And we'll season that up, and then before we add our liquid base in, I'm going to pull out some of that chicken to make our taquitos or flautas, or just little like meat and cheese rolled up in a tortilla and fried. So delicious, but they're perfect for dipping in soup. So let's give this a good toss. We'll kind of coat these guys up. Perfect. And then I have some celery as well on here. We're going to slice down the middle. Make, again, nice smaller pieces so you don't have big chunks of celery in there, but really will add a nice flavor to the base of our soup, which is going to be kind of a cream, or not a cream, but a tomato and chicken base to it. So we're going to use some tomato paste plus a can of diced, tomatoes with green chilies in there. So that will kind of like make our broth base just really flavorful. And the celery will just add some aromatic notes to it. Okay. I'll get these in here and let them saute up for just a second. And sauteing them before we do our broth base is just going to allow their flavors to come out a little bit nicer.
Did your friend like the Christmas dinner you made?
She did. She said it was wonderful. I was kind of a little hesitant how everything would reheat, and it reheated up nicely. She sent pictures of it, and it had a perfect medium rare into it as well. So it was excellent, and they were really appreciative of it, and it was delicious. So I'm always glad. It always makes me like more nervous when I'm cooking for other people because you want everything to turn out perfect for them, And it's like, I know it should, but you just always worry a little bit. Here is our lovely, beautiful blueberries here. You can see they're oozing out some of their little blueberry deliciousness. Looks like I've got one lemon seed. And grab that. And we'll have this be our filling in our turnovers. And I'm not doing a super tart blueberry. Another little lemon seed, those little hideout for me. But more of like a sweet, like a blueberry pie. But we have that lemon juice and we have a sweet, but the vanilla kind of brings it all together. And I think it makes it really more of like a wintry version of it than, when you go a little bit more tart during the summer. Okay, I'm going to turn this down nice and low and just let it simmer for a little bit. And then before we're about to put it in our turnovers, we will put a little bit of cornstarch in there to thicken it up so that it won't run out everywhere, which is important because a turnover, you don't want your base to be too liquidy or you'll have a soggy turnover. Okay, I got the last of my sweet peppers. We're going to dice these up and put them in there. Now, if you want a little bit of heat, you could definitely throw in like a jalapeno or, poblano or any type of spicier pepper.
But you have a question. Do turnovers use the same technique as pie crust?
No. So with a turnover, we're actually going to be using frozen puff pastry. Now you can always make your own puff pastry. But what you're going to do is you essentially are going to have a square, you'll put kind of in the base, you'll fold over and you crimp the edge and then you brush it with some egg wash. So it's not like a hand pie. If you use a pie crust, then instead of a turnover, you have more like a hand pie. It's a different type of crust for it. So a puff pastry is going to be a lighter, flakier crust, where pie crust is typically denser in it. There we go. And I do make hand pies. I made hand pies earlier in the fall when we had so many apples for it, and they were delicious. But turnovers are just a little lighter, fluffier, more like a croissant than a pie. And it's one of those things where you can make your own puff pastry, but the time you save by just buying some frozen is a lot of time. Yes, I always say the homemade version is slightly better, but is it worth the extra couple hours? And I always say no. There's just some things that, where you can truly get it store-bought, and it's pretty much as good as if you made it yourself.
Yo has a question for you.
What's for dinner tonight? So tonight, as I told you, I'm going through and cooking through. I had some pork chops. So I think we're going to have pork chops tonight for dinner. Not sure how I'm going to cook them, but that is going to be our protein for tonight on there. I do have mushrooms, so I might do pork chops and a mushroom gravy. Maybe I'll do like a southern fried pork chop with a mushroom gravy and mashed potatoes, but it is yet to be determined. Okay, let's take a look over here. Beautiful. Perfect. So I have it nice and low. Let me wash my hands so I don't have any peppery feeling on it. And I'm going to turn this down. And we're going to start getting our turnovers out so we can start baking them. And then we'll make a little sweet glaze to go over it. So anytime you use puff pastry, you just want to set your puff pastry out anywhere between 40 minutes to an hour before you're going to use it so that it de-thaws. You don't want to leave it out too long because then it becomes too soft and harder to work with and doesn't give you the same result. So you want it to be cold but not frozen. And you get 2 sheets with it. Now, when I am using puff pastry, you don't want to just use your sheets like this. You need to roll it out a little bit thinner because otherwise it's way too thick. So I'm just going to roll it out and I'm going to try my best to keep it in the rectangle. And this is going to allow you to have a thinner base and just a little bit lighter so it's not as dense and it just bakes up a little bit nicer. Because they're just too thick if you leave them unrolled. And then we've got our blueberry base there for our little compote. We'll add some cornstarch in to thicken it up, make a little slurry there. That way we'll have all that blueberry juice flavor, but not the liquidiness of it. Okay, looking good. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to cut this into 4 pieces. Make them as even as possible. Now I say that and then they're always wonky sizes. And you can use a knife. I'm just using a pastry cutter because again, when you cut it thin, it should come apart fairly easy. And if your dough is cold and not like room temperature, it won't be too flimsy. Okay, we've got first round. We'll put them on here and then we can get ready. I'll roll out the next one. That way when I fill them up with the blueberry base on it, I can get them all prepped up at the same time and going. Now these, when we fill them up, we'll fold them over so we'll have plenty of space on here. And you can do 2 trays. I'm using my big 1.5 sheets because that will allow me to have all 8 of those turnovers on there. Get this rolled out. Make sure you take your parchment paper out. And we're going to roll it again. Don't roll it too thin because then it will snag and tear. So it's finding that kind of happy medium between. I feel like I roll it maybe like 1.5 times the size of it when it came out. Looks like, there we go. Trying to make it as even as possible. But again, sometimes you get a little wonky when you're rolling. We're going to flip it up, flip it over because that side is a little bit drier, has more flour on it. And then we can kind of cut this.
And where did you buy the dough?
So this I just got at Publix, my local grocery store. You can get it at Target, Kroger, whatever grocery store. You just buy it in the freezer section. So it's typically where you can buy like the frozen berries and Cool Whip. That's where it's located. But this is the good old Pepperidge Farm. I find I like their version. I like the best out of them. I've had a couple different ones, but they're my favorite tasting because they just taste like a puff pastry. No addedness to it. It's nice and flaky. Okay. I'll get these guys on here. I'm just going to kind of fold them and start folding them over that way. When I'll be ready to form them and shape them. And I will say, try your best to make them as a square versus a rectangle because they fold a little bit nicer when you can actually match them up. Now you can also fold them like hot dog style as well, but they won't have the classic pretty turnover shape.
Can you also use phyllo dough?
Phyllo dough is a very different dough. It's a very flaky, multi-layer dough. So that's better for if you're going to make like a baklava or, it's a different. It would not give you the same result or taste. So it's not something that's kind of comparable. Now, if you want to make homemade baklava, phyllo dough is what you want to use because they're paper thin sheets and there's lots of layers of it. And you kind of brush butter between each layer as you're building with it. And it gives you a very kind of a crunchier base to it. Okay, so these are sort of put how we're going to have them. Let's finish off the base of our blueberries so that we'll be ready to kind of turn them in.
Have you ever made baklava?
I have made baklava. A couple years ago, we were doing universal yum boxes, which is, we actually just started redoing them because they were so much fun. And I think we had a box. It was, I'm not sure what country exactly. I think it was Turkey. But it was over that country. And their suggested dessert was to make baklava. And so I made it for the very first time. And I used the phyllo dough. And it was delicious. And it was actually a lot easier than I originally thought it was going to be. And maybe that's because I purchased the phyllo dough instead of making it. We're going to mix this in. And essentially, once we have the blueberries form a nice kind of thick gel, then we will be ready. Just sprinkle a little bit of that cornstarch on at a time and then mix it in. Trying to kind of coat up my top of my spatula here so it all gets, there we go. And then let it heat up before you add some more so that you don't add too much in here.
Do you ever make sourdough bread?
I make sourdough bread a lot. I actually have some sourdough bread in my sourdough bag. I made a loaf for Christmas Eve and a loaf for our Christmas, for our smorgasbord, as well as a challah bread as well on there. And I just fed up my starter this morning so I can prep up some more loaves. Yeah. So I enjoy making things. Oh, and I made sourdough stollen for Christmas as well. Okay, we've got our blueberry compote working there. I might add another round of our cornstarch in. This is going to be our filling for our turnovers. I'm going to add enough until I've got a good thick gel for it.
Can you go over what's in?
Yes.
Blueberries?
So it is essentially about a pound of fresh blueberries, about 2/3 of a cup of sugar, juice from half a lemon, lemon zest, and about a half a teaspoon of vanilla. And we should have this nice kind of sweet base, not too tart, but a nice sweetness to it. Let's get this. I'm trying to get it to the right thickness because you don't want it runny when you put it in here or you'll have a soggy turnover. And this blueberries are more liquidy than an apple or a pear. So you're going to need a little bit more cornstarch to get you there. But we're almost there, I can tell just by the viscosity of it. Let's let that heat up for just a second. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit. And while that's heating up, let's give our little things a nice stir over here. And here we've got our onions, celery, carrots, and peppers sauteing up for the base of our soup. We'll add in some tomato paste in just a second and then our shredded chicken. But I want to get this going. Here. Should get me there in just a second. My nice little paste. Delicious. Once it comes to a boil, I think it will thicken up all the way. I don't want to add any more cornstarch until I get there on there. But let's bring it a little bit higher. Okay, while we're waiting for that to come to a nice boil, let's get our tomato paste in here. We're going to season it up with our spices, then we'll throw in our chicken on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to reserve part of our chicken to go in our little like taquitos that will saute or fry up in our pan. But we want to season them first. And it's just nice to season them this part and then pull out some of that seasoned shredded chicken and the rest will be in our soup. We're going to add in a good heaping spoonful of tomato paste. This is going to thicken up our broth base, give it a nice tomato base without it being too like runny. Give it a richness to it. And looks like our blueberries are just about there. Looking good. Perfect. I'm going to add just a smidge more. And just sprinkle it over the top. And then as it goes in there, it will incorporate and thicken up. Okay. I think we're at a fairly decent base for this. Yep, you can see how it's starting to scoop up now. So I'm going to turn it off. Slide this over here. We'll let it cool for just a second, or at least get the bubbles off, and then we can stuff our turnovers here, and then we'll brush them with an egg wash and pop them in the oven at 400 to bake for about 15 minutes. Okay, let's get some spices in here so that when we throw in our chicken, it will have some nice flavor. We're going to start with a little bit of oregano, about a teaspoon of dried oregano. A couple good shakes. And then we're going to do about a teaspoon of ancho chili powder. I don't need to take the lid off. This will give it a nice kind of earthy. It's not a very spicy chili powder, so won't make it too hot. We're going to do a little bit of paprika, which will add a nice kind of pop of color to it as well, but nice kind of savory flavor. And then for our big spice, I've got our Mexican Fiesta seasoning, which is just a really good blend that whenever I'm go to Whole Foods, I always grab it because I like it, because it gives you just a lot of great flavors. We're going to add in about 2 teaspoons. And it's not too spicy either, and doesn't have any salt in it, so it's not like a taco seasoning or anything like that. Okay. We're going to mix this up, let it kind of really cook into that tomato base for a second, and then we will add in our chicken and let that all kind of coat up in a little bit of water to start with, so that the chicken can get a little bit of dampness to it. But it looks like beautiful, perfect. This is right where we want it. Okay, I'm going to actually slide this over here. That way I have this to work with.